So at a very young age, I was put on anti-anxiety medication, antidepressants, all those kinds of things. And so throughout my teenage years, I was kind of numbed through everything. And I was kind of floating, I guess, through life in those years. And what really kind of shifted things for me is I was.
Hi, I'm Kelly Kessler, and I'm the host of the podcast, Rewiring Health. Whether you're an entrepreneur who feels like you have the weight of the world on your shoulders, trying to juggle all aspects of business, or you're a corporate employee who feels like you're pulled in multiple directions, trying to excel and meet deadlines, or you're a passionate parent who feels like you pour your heart and soul into your children and there's not much left for you, you're in the right place. This podcast is designed to give you tools, tips, and strategies around how you can cultivate balance within your life, feel energized and present, and stop feeling like you're compromising your health and inner harmony. I am so glad you're here. Anxiety, panic attacks, feeling numb, and just going through the motions of life deeply impact your well-being and can make each day feel like a battle. In this episode, I have the honor of speaking with Jessica Rylee, who candidly shares her story of how she got off anxiety medication, began to feel her emotions, and transformed her life. Jessica Rylee is a business and breathwork coach who works with ambitious and motivated entrepreneurs, coaches, soul-led leaders who are ready to revolutionize the industry, master their online presence, and scale to their first 5 figures. It was such an amazing conversation with Jessica, and I just appreciate how candid she was about her journey and how she really cultivated this inner strength within herself to overcome some major battles in her life. And it was just so inspiring to talk to her, and I'm so excited to share it with you today. If you're an entrepreneur, a busy professional, or a passionate parent, you know life is hectic. And the last thing you want is to feel more overwhelmed trying to fit in all the self-care recommendations that you hear. That's why I created my free 12-minute wellness habits guide that gives you the most important things that you can do throughout the day to feel renewed energy and clarity throughout your life without feeling like you have another job to do. Download it in the description today. Welcome to another episode of Rewiring Health. So excited to be joined by Jessica Rylee today. So I know this is going to be a great conversation, one that will really resonate with any of you who feel like you're working all the time, or feel like you're stuck in your business, or feel like you just can't strike a balance in your life. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited for the conversation as well.
Yes, definitely. So what I want to hear is because there's always a story behind the person, like what brought you to where you are today and what led you down this path. And do you mind sharing with the audience what actually brought you to this position where you're in the space helping people achieve balance in their life?
Yeah, I love that question. And I love talking about it because I think it's so relatable. So growing up, I have always struggled with anxiety. I've always had anxiety. My brain is one of those brains that just loops and loops and loops and loops. And so at a very young age, I was put on anti-anxiety medication, antidepressants, all those kinds of things. And so throughout my teenage years, I was kind of numbed through everything. And I was kind of floating, I guess, through life in those years. And what really kind of shifted things for me is I was introduced to breath work to help with my panic attacks, to help with my anxiety attacks. And I started out with the down regulating breath work, which is very, very parasympathetic, very rest and digest, kind of taking you out of that fight or flight and putting you back into balance and peace and calm. And so I started out with that. And it wasn't until last year, so last May of 2022, that I had my first experience with upregulating breathwork, which really taps into the sympathetic to get to the root cause of things. And so after a couple of months of practicing that and moving through all of my energy, I was able to come off of my anxiety medication after 14 years of being on it. Mm-hmm. And this was just a huge weight lifted. I think I didn't realize how numbed I was until I came off of this anxiety medication. And I was like, what is happening? I felt like I was feeling every single emotion, every single feeling for the very first time. And being in my adulthood, I was like, well, I should know how to deal with this stuff. I should know how to move through this. And I didn't, because I didn't really feel anything for the last 14 years. So breathwork has really helped me balance myself and like regulate my nervous system so that I'm able to feel, feelings of anger, feelings of jealousy, feelings of sadness without spiraling down into anxiety attacks and panic attacks. And so this feeling of just like liberation is like the best way to describe it, because it's just freedom from the ego, freedom from like self, I guess, because the anxiety was a huge part of my life for so long, and it stuck with me and it was driving the bus. And so now, because I've learned how to take over those emotions and really feel into them and heal from the root cause, that is like my biggest purpose, my biggest mission, which then brought me to, discovering more about breathwork and how I can help other people kind of overcome these feelings and these emotions themselves. So it's been a really wild journey.
It's amazing. And just like one thing that really stuck out to me as you were talking was like, I'm an adult, I should know how to do this. And I think so many of us get caught in that trap of like, I'm an adult, like I should be better than this. And it's like, we come down on ourselves, but we were never given the tools to do this. So it's like, why are we expecting that we know how to do this when we don't have the tools to actually do it? So I love that you said that, because that can be a real big sticking point for people thinking like, what's wrong with me? I don't know how to get myself out of this. And it's like that's a beautiful sense of hope for someone who maybe is in the spot that you were in, realizing like, I never had the tools, I didn't know how to do this. So of course, like, why would I expect myself to know how to do this? So I love that. And the fact that you also speak, medications obviously serve a time and place, but, if you can live without them, ideally, that's a beautiful thing to be able to experience these emotions and feel them and understand them better. And I know you talked about how they numbed you. Can you talk a little bit more about like about what it felt like to actually experience these emotions, and how did you work through some of that when you started experiencing the emotions?
Oh my gosh, it felt like absolute chaos. Like it was the hardest thing I think I've ever done in my whole entire life. And it was interesting because I felt like I had to use my brain to fix my brain. And it's like the weirdest thing ever. Like your brain's saying one thing, your ego's saying another thing, but you're working through all your healing. And I was listening to a podcast episode like not too long ago, and he mentions this about like how messed up is it that we have to use our brain in order to fix our brain. And it just was kind of like a full circle moment. I was like, that's exactly how it felt. Felt like I was really battling with like my internal. And like going back to the medication, I absolutely believe in medication. I think medication's an awesome tool if that's what you need. For me, it was like 14 years of trying to figure out what the medication was. I went through like 6 different kinds of medications. I didn't feel myself on them. I picked up I got on this other medication that was actually used to prevent like OCD. And then that brought on OCD symptoms for me. And so it was just a really long journey of trying to figure out what worked for me. And then when I was introduced to breathwork, I was like, this is what works. Like, this is the thing. So yeah, when I started feeling all of these feelings and emotions, it was, yeah, I guess that's like the best way to describe it, like battling with my own brain. And like everything was like contraindicating everything, like, or contradicting, sorry, everything. It was a huge roller coaster of me, I guess.
Yeah. And it's really challenging. And like I said, it's like your brain trying to figure out your own brain, and because that's really what it is. It's like you have this wiring pattern, and then you also have what role the medication played on your brain for all those years that it's also trying to figure out. And on top of like any limiting beliefs you had for all those years that you have to work out, like it can feel like, just like you said, chaotic to figure all that out. On how do I move forward in my life into that? Can you talk about, because breathwork, I am a huge believer in breathwork. It has done tremendous things for my life as well. So I'm a big advocate of it, but I feel like sometimes people don't understand the role of breathwork. Like, what is it actually doing to allow you to get to that point where you felt like chaos to a point where you maybe felt more balanced and peace? Can you talk about that and the power of breathwork?
Yeah, like breathwork is so powerful. It is so powerful. So there's 2 like main types of breathwork. There's down regulating breathwork, and then there's up regulating breathwork. And I touched a little bit on both of those, but the down regulating breath work. So I guess in our bodies, we have our autonomic nervous system. Then we have the parasympathetic side and the sympathetic side. Down regulating breath work is really helpful for getting you from that sympathetic, which is the fight or flight, to that parasympathetic, which is the rest and digest. And breathwork plays like a huge part in switching between those two. The upregulating is really good for going from parasympathetic to sympathetic. So actually tapping into that stress response so that you can get to the root. But what happens in breathwork? So think of when you are really calm, really collected, really grounded, you're probably breathing in and out through your nose and into your belly, right? That's the parasympathetic way to breathe. Think of now when you're breathing, when you are hyperventilating and you're super stressed, you're in that anxious state. You're breathing into your chest and your mouth breathing. So we can use breath in certain ways to tap back and forth in between these two nervous systems. And I think it's really powerful because we have that ability. Like people breathe so much throughout their day. We take roughly around 22,000 breaths a day, over 500 million breaths throughout our lifetime. And we have the power to be able to move through. So the down regulating breath work is mostly like nasal breathing, belly breathing, and it really activates that parasympathetic so that you can get out of the stress state. My favorite type of breath work is the upregulating. And how this works is when we breathe in this way, we are consciously like hyperventilating to a point. So we're breathing really fast in and out through our mouth and mostly into our chest space. And what happens because of this is we're decreasing the levels of CO2 in our body. And what happens because of this is you temporarily shut off the blood flow to the prefrontal cortex, which, if you don't know what that is, it's basically like the mind chatter, the monkey mind. That's where the ego hangs out. And so you're silencing that ego so that you can journey into the subconscious brain so that you can get to the root cause of what's causing all of the triggers. And then you can look at them and heal them on a body level, on a somatic level. So that you can move forward from them.
Yeah, that's a beautiful explanation because again, I think a lot of times people have that perception of breath work, like it's just calming, it's just relaxing, but it does work in both ways. And that's a beautiful spectrum of it, is that you can use it in the way that serves you and what you need in your own situation. So I love that. It's a great explanation of that because that really is what it is. It's the power of the mind and body connection that you have in how you can move forward. It's like a lot of times people think, oh, if I could just think more positive, I could just change my brain. It doesn't work. You can't actually just change the way you think. You have to move through the body and use that reciprocal relationship to change those patterns. So yeah, I love that explanation.
And like another thing too is like our minds, we operate so much in our brain, in our mind, in our thinking mind. Our minds are right here, right now, right? Our bodies are timeless. So breathwork is really good for helping move through trauma, like whether it's like big traumatic events or whether it's smaller traumatic events. It's really helpful for that because we're moving into the body. And so when something triggers us right now, our minds know that it's not happening, but our body, it says, okay, we felt this feeling before and it must be happening again. And so breathwork allows us to kind of go into that body awareness. Where am I feeling it? Where is it coming from? What is it trying to tell me? And we're able to breathe through that by journeying into the subconscious. And yeah, when I talk about breathwork, a lot of people are like, oh yeah, it's like meditation. It's nothing like meditation. Meditation is an amazing tool. It's really powerful. You have to practice a lot at it, right? To quiet down that ego mind. With breath work, you quiet that ego mind in like the first 10 minutes. So it's like you're like biohacking that part of your system, right? So yeah, it's really, really interesting. There's definitely a lot of good things that can come out of a breathwork journey.
Yeah, 100%. I like how you talk about how immediate it is. And because again, sometimes when people get stuck in that rumination cycle, thinking negative thoughts and over and over again, worrying about the worst case scenario, and then you go tell them to meditate, it's like, that's the last thing like they could handle. But if you give them something actionable, like breath work, that is so reactive quickly, and it changes the way the nervous system is actually working instantly. Now you can get that evidence that the brain needs to be like, oh, okay, this does work. Let me keep moving forward with it. So it's amazing, how that works and how it's so tied in with the nervous system. It literally is the link between those two systems. So I absolutely love that. One thing I would love for you to talk on, because I think sometimes people think, I can either achieve and constantly keep going, grinding, or I can take care of myself. Can you talk about your journey where you've been able to cultivate some inner peace, and how has that impacted your business and your achievement in your life?
Yeah, absolutely. I love that question. So using breath work, honestly, breath work has been the biggest shift for me. It helps really remove that stagnant and stuck energy. So if you're constantly hustling, you're burning yourself out, you're creating this belief that you have to hustle in order to make money, you have to hustle in order to be successful, when like the opposite is quite true as well. Like, yes, you can hustle your way to the top, but how are you going to feel when you get there? Right. And so what happened with me is I was always taught to hustle. I was always taught to work. And if I'm not working, I'm not being successful, or I'm not doing the things, right? Like I'm not being as productive as I could be, kind of thing. But the real power comes with aligning your inner self to your outer success. And I mean, you hear all these really successful people talking about like the secret to their success is not the strategy, it's not the work, it's the mindset. And I truly believe that everything is energy in the world, and the more that you align your energy with the things and the desires that you have, the more likely you're going to get them. And I think that breath work for me was that thing that allowed me to create space in my body and remove all of this stuck energy and stale energy and all of these limiting beliefs that I had on myself of, even the ego mind saying, who are you to do this? Or like, you're not working today, you should be working today. And when you remove all of that stuff, you have so much space in your body for creativity, for more of like a flow. And I noticed something in my business that when I was hustling myself to the ground, when I was working, burning myself out, telling myself that this is what I had to do, that's when I was struggling the most. Versus now I work like 4 days a week. I have very strict boundaries. I work on my energy, like all of these things. I'm creating all this space. That's when I've been the most successful. And that's where I've seen the most results in my business, is because I'm not forcing anything, because forced energy is not going to get you anywhere. It's almost like the universe is saying, slow down. The path is already laid out for you. All you have to do is follow these steps. Like, you don't really have to do more work than just following your intuition and following the nudges.
100%. And thank you for sharing that too, because that is such a huge point there, and a sticking point for so many people who get stuck in those patterns of like, well, if I'm not moving it forward, it's not moving forward. And that becomes a vicious cycle. And we're taught that in the world. We, even society tells us, you got to keep working, keep staying busy, you got to do more. And, constantly looking outside ourselves to validate that we are enough. And it's that vicious cycle we get stuck in. And we think that that's the only way. And we don't realize the cost in the long run of what that's costing us. Like, we don't realize how many things are getting taken away. And I love that you talk about the energy, because I'm a huge believer in that too. And I've noticed that in my life too. I didn't realize how much my energy was so off until I started diving into that. But it's true. Like, the universe really is working for you. And if you can't even handle what you're doing now and you're feeling overwhelmed, burnout, bogged down, it's not going to open up other opportunities for you, because you're not able to handle what you have right now. So it's like, once you're aligned, it's like now things start coming into your life because you're in a better place to actually handle that. So
And like, I always tell people too that, I have a couple of clients who are like, hey, what's next? I'm like, let's just take a breath. Like, let's just breathe. Because I'm like, if you're building up your business from scratch right now, and you're building it in that hustle, and you're building it basically to grow it to exhaustion, or to grow it to overwhelm, like, what's the point? What's the point in having a business if you're not going to be able to take a seat and just breathe? Right. And so that's like one of my best, or one of my most important values, is like, take the time that you need, because if you build your business on hustle, that's what it's going to be. It's going to be hustle. And then when you are successful and you do have the financial freedom, it's still going to feel like hustle. It's still going to feel overwhelming. And you're still going to have that burnout. You have to learn to move forward without the burnout.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely. And just having the sustainability, because again, it's that short-term gains or long-term gains. Like, what are you looking for? And, most people in business would say long-term, but what are their actions saying? And so that's a
Short-term
huge
action.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Can you help for someone who's like, well, is that me? Can you help differentiate like how people can start seeing that in themselves? Like if they are truly stuck in that hustle, or are they like in more of a balanced state where it is sustainable? Like what are some things that they may look for within themselves to kind of differentiate where they are in their business?
Does it feel fun? If it's not feeling fun, what's the point, right? What's the point again? Um, how do you feel in your energy? Do you feel like this is something that you could do for the rest of your life, or, until you decide to retire or whatever? If you are constantly stressing every single day, like just like close your eyes and just think about, what is my energy right now? And how am I feeling right now? Am I feeling heavy? And if I'm feeling heavy, where is that heaviness coming from? Where in my body am I feeling that? And then, every single day, just kind of checking in with yourself and saying, what did I do today? What was I productive with today? And what needs to shift tomorrow so that I'm not feeling overwhelmed? And I think a cool thing to do, like I always tell my clients, is time block time for you, right? A lot of the times, like it's hard to do that because people are like, well, I need to be putting out content. I need to be creating. I need to be doing these things. And if that's you, that's okay. But the first step is to acknowledge it and start to put yourself first. Because if you're, building a business and you're not putting yourself first, again, the energy is going to be misaligned and it's going to burn out. Like it's happened so many times before. So yeah, so if you're somebody, and like there's a fine line too, because there's a lot of people that like the hustle. There's a lot of people that like being busy. Like I love being busy. I love the go, go, go mentality, but I also know when to take a break so that I don't burn out and so I'm not overwhelmed. So going back to the question of like, is it fun? Is this working for me or is this working against me?
Yeah, it's really good questions to ask yourself, because it is like your life moves in the direction of your questions. So if you start asking yourself the right questions, you start getting the answers that really will serve you. So those are two good. You can ask yourself for anyone listening, like, is it fun? I think that's something that we forget to ask ourselves because we're always stuck in the I should versus like, do I want to? Even like people get stuck in that in self-care. It's like, oh, I should because X, Y, and Z, or someone told me to do this. Like, well, are you actually enjoying this? Because if you're not enjoying the self-care and the things that are for you, like, does it even matter then too? So it's such an important question to answer in so many aspects of life. So really good one there. Can you talk about like your self-care routine? Like, what does that look like so that someone could maybe get an example and say like, okay, let me start implementing some of these and see if it works for me.
Yeah. So I'm not as like committed to this as I should be. But something that really has shifted my mood, my energy is like cold showers. So I don't do like complete cold showers, but at the very end of my cold or of my warm shower, I'll blast it to cold for like 15, 20 seconds. And really getting into the habit of doing that. Again, like it's coming into winter time now and it's hard. It's a hard thing to do, right? But I think too, like that moving past the ego side of it, and even if it's for 10 seconds, if you can do something for 10 seconds, you can do something for 30 seconds. If you can do something for 30 seconds, you can do something for 60 seconds, right? Like it's all starting at that point. Journaling, and then like journaling is another thing. And then also breath work, like obviously breath work, right? Throughout the day, I do little breath work. So before this podcast interview, I did a round of box breath just to kind of really tap into that parasympathetic state. Before I start my work day, I do breath work. Throughout my day, I catch myself breathing in and out through my mouth. Like I think too, like the self-care routine. I think a lot of people get stuck on that is like, it has to be a routine. You have to wake up every morning, you have to journal for 20 minutes and read 5 pages. And it's like, it's the same as business. Like, don't burn yourself out with the self-care routine as well. Like take a minute when you need a minute, do some breath work when you have a minute. I try to do the upregulating breath work about once a week. where it's like I really get into my subconscious and I can really heal on a body level. And then I take the rest of the week to integrate that.
Mhm.
So, what that might look like is, a 30 to 45-minute upregulating breathwork session. I might cry, I might yell, I might be really angry, I might release a lot of things. And then I take the next week to just really like love on myself and say, your feelings are valid and what you're experiencing is valid. And I think that's a really cool form of self-care as well, is just holding yourself in that energy and allowing yourself to feel the things when you need to feel them. So yeah, long story long, the cold showers, journaling, breath work, and all those kinds of things. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And thank you for sharing. And huge point there, because that is somewhere where people get stuck. It's that routine. Like, and it really, routine doesn't necessarily serve you, because if it's the same thing day in and day out, like your system's like, oh, here we go again, another 20 minutes of this. Like, it is like adjusting, like life adjusts. Like there's days that are going to be really hard for you, that you might need something different. You need to adapt. Like I find that too. Like I get in cycles of like different things. Like I did cold showers for 8 months. And then I was like, you know what? This isn't serving me anymore. Like it was
Oh,
wonderful. And then, yeah, like I loved the same thing. Like I found so much benefit. And I'm like, I don't feel like I'm getting the benefit I want. I'm going to replace this with something else. And so I did. And then it's like, I'm feeling like I want to reintroduce cold showers again. So it evolves. And like, I love how you brought that point up, because bringing that flexibility and like being, okay, here's your maybe 10 minutes in the morning, do what you like with it. It doesn't have to be so regimented, because the rest of your life is regimented. It's like, just do what flows with you, have a lot of different things that you can start pulling in from. And I find that to be very beneficial. So it's a huge point there, because it's like, you don't want to get stuck in a rut with your self-care, because the self-care really is just bringing whatever brings you peace in that moment, expression and kind of calm. So it's going to change, and having those things, like, it's so funny because I did breath work before this podcast too. So we're on
I
the
love
same page. Yeah. So like,
I love
it's
that.
like integrating those things. If I'm stopped at a red light, I'm going to do some breath work. Like, it doesn't have to be like this time set aside. Honestly, the best is just how it's integrated into your life when you need it. So yeah,
Yeah.
huge.
Yeah. That's so funny that, like, stopped at a red light and you did breath work. Like when I came off of my anxiety medication, that was a weird trigger for me. And I don't know why, but I'd be stopped at the red light and I would just start feeling like panicky. And I honestly have no idea why. Like it was the weirdest. I experienced a lot of things when I came off my anxiety medication. And so it's funny because I used to do breath work all the time at red lights, like the quick, like box breathing, like really tapping into that parasympathetic. And now I notice, like, when I come to a red light, I automatically just start doing it. Like, even if I'm not stressed, even if I'm not anxious, I'll just randomly start doing it because I'm training my body. Right. And that's a cool thing about breath work too, is the more that you practice, the more it just becomes second nature. And like, if you start getting anxious, you'll automatically feel yourself belly breathe, nasal breathe, and it just happens. And yeah, so it's really cool. I also struggled a lot with I used to be like super bubbly and super outgoing. My friends would like bring me to things to be the buffer. Like I was like the middle person, the icebreaker, whatever. When I came off my anxiety medication, I got like world's worst social anxiety of my whole life, which was so new to me. I've never been that person. So I had to learn again, like how to go to restaurants and like how to, go in public spaces. I've missed friends' birthdays because, I was too anxious to go. But what did I do when I missed those birthdays? I did breath work. I didn't just sit there in my stuff. I chose self. I chose that self-care. And, it wasn't, like you said, like it wasn't a structured routine, but it was like what I needed in that moment is what I gave myself.
I love that. And thank you for being so candid, because again, for anyone who's listening is maybe like even considering getting off their anxiety medication, or is in the process of it, or is just wondering what it might be like, this is really helpful for hearing this and being like, okay, you can do it. And this is what you might experience, but here are some tools that you can do to help yourself through that. And also talking about, the change, and like saying, like how you were very social and then you experienced that. And, but the fact that, you had tools to work through that, and you could get to a point where that's not so impactful in your life. I mean, that's just beautiful. And like, what a gift to somebody, again, who is maybe going through that themselves. So thank you for sharing all that.
Yeah. And I think like the
Yeah.
biggest thing is just giving yourself that space, like giving yourself the space to heal through it. I had to have a lot of conversations with my friends, like, hey, please just give me, like, just be patient. Like, I'm going through something. And at first, I was like, oh, I don't want to tell them because I feel embarrassed or I feel like this. But then I was like, you know what? My anxiety works with me when I'm open about it, when I can talk about my anxiety, because I have this really weird thing too, where I get anxiety about getting anxiety. And so when I can out it and I can say, hey, I'm Jess, I have anxiety. It's like, okay, what's my part now? Like what are we going to be anxious about? Because everybody already knows, right?
Yeah.
And so that was something that I had a nudge that I had to be open with it. Right. And so following those nudges too, like if you're somebody who is struggling with anxiety and you're like, I get anxious because of XYZ, like just out your anxiety and just say, like, hey, I get anxious when these things happen and I might need to take a breath. I might need to take a breather. Like the very first time I went out for dinner afterwards, I told my friends, I was like, guys, I might need to like step away and like just do some breathing. Like I might just need to take a second. And all of them were like, yeah, all right. And that was it. Right. So just giving yourself that space
Yeah.
and giving yourself that love and that compassion when you're going through the hard stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's huge. And just owning it, like you were saying, like owning this is what I'm experiencing. And like sounds like you had a really good support system too with your friends. So that's amazing. Like people who understand that. And it's also too, it's like there's so many more people who maybe don't feel comfortable saying this. So it's like even just the fact that you have more people or a platform like this that you can say, like, this is what I've gone through. Like same thing. Like I've gone through a lot of anxiety in my life too. So it's like it can be so like suffocating at times, but when you start saying like, hey, this is just how it is, this is how I feel right now in this moment, there is a feel that you get that's like a release, and it's like unless you've experienced it, there is like a release there where you don't feel like it's like something wrong with you. It's just like, this is what I'm experiencing at this time. It's telling me something. I have tools that I can use to help myself feel better. And then it's just it becomes something that you don't feel is so you're so overwhelmed by or it just consumes you. So yes. And I hope for anyone who's listening, if you're experiencing that, like, I hope this brings you some peace or just a step forward to move forward in giving yourself some kind of sense of peace and that you don't necessarily have to live with that forever and you can move forward in your life. So
Yeah. And I think too, like I have this saying, like, if you can take away its power in this moment, you can take away its power in life. Right. And so saying like, no, I am going to overcome this. I say out because I'm making it visible. I'm taking away its mask and I'm outing my anxiety. So if I can out my anxiety and take away its power, it no longer has power over me in this moment. I can do that in any moment in my life. And I was actually talking to my counselor this morning, which counseling is also something that I do for my self-care. I do that every 2 weeks. I was talking to her and she was saying, your emotions and your feelings are valid, but they don't have to run your life. And I'm like, whoa, that's a really good point. I was like, I need to write that down. And I just find that, a lot of the time we give in to the hard stuff or we let it happen, like because we're scared to face it, but it gets easier when you face it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that fear component is huge. And I also love how you talked about that you go to a counselor, because it's like, we can talk about this and it maybe some ways it feels like, oh, it seems very simple, but there is a huge point in like, this is a process. This is a daily thing. This is something you're getting support for. And it's like, these are all these beautiful resources that are available. And so like, thank you for sharing that, because that is a huge thing, and having somebody to guide you along in this process. It's not necessarily to do alone. It's like there's resources and people that can help you with that, but to use breath in conjunction with that is absolutely a beautiful thing, because now you have something with you at all times to help you along with that. So I love that. For someone who wanted to connect with you, work with you, where can they find you?
I am on Facebook. I recently I recently left Instagram just because I was like, I just want to focus on one platform. So I'm on Facebook, Jessica Rylee. It's, I think, like slash the Jessica Rylee on there. I also have a Facebook group. It's called the breathwork community. And it's a really fun space in there. We talk a lot about breathwork, about mental health, about anxiety healing. There's lots of fun events that go on in there. And then I'm also at www.thejessicarylee.com. So there's all my platforms.
Great. And I'll put everything in the show notes too for anyone who's listening that you're trying to write this down really quick. It'll be in the show notes so you can grab it later. But thank you so much, Jessica, for being on today and just being so candid and open with your story, because I know it's going to help someone who's listening today that maybe doesn't know where to go, what the next step is. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And again, like I think that's the whole point of this, right? Like the more open that I can be, the more help I can be to other people. And that's a really powerful thing as well. Like the more open that you can be, the more you are going to impact other people's lives. When I started opening up about my anxiety and about
100%. And
yeah, like it just, people were coming to me being like, oh, I have that too. Oh, I'm experiencing that. And it creates connection. And I think that's the first part, the first step of healing.
Oh, there we go. Sorry, it froze for a second. I wanted to make sure I didn't miss it.
Oh, yes, that's okay.
I 100% agree. And I really do believe that some of these things that we go through in life that are really, really challenging, that maybe consume years of our life, are really there for a reason, so we can help somebody once we get out on the other side of it, or work through it, or even are just a step ahead of somebody who's maybe a step behind, that we can help them. So thank you so much for taking what you've lived through and helping others through the process, because that really is such a gift to somebody that, is maybe listening and doesn't really know what to do. So thank you so much. And again, for everyone who's listening, please subscribe to the podcast. If you found value in this, share it with someone who could also find value in this. We don't want to hold this to ourselves. Share those with anyone that you think would benefit from these messages, because there's so many of us who, do struggle with things. And again, that openness and realizing that you're not alone. A lot of people are going through different things. And if you connect with someone who can really help you, take that as a nudge from the universe to move in that direction. So thank you again for everyone who's listening today. Hey there. Thanks for listening to this episode. I hope it serves you well to start rewiring your brain to create the life you desire. If you found value in this, please share it with a friend and tag me on Facebook or Instagram at Dr. Kelly Kessler.